Okay, let's unpack this. When you hear family business, what's the first image that genuinely springs to your mind? Is it the dramatic stuff, the public power struggles, maybe even backstabbing like we see with the Murdochs and News Corp, or the Redstones and National Amusements? Those stories seem to constantly make headlines. It's easy to get caught up in those narratives, isn't it? Because, let's be honest, they're incredibly compelling. That mix of family and vast wealth, it draws you in.
And that's fascinating, right? Because while the media absolutely loves those dramatic narratives, the truth on the ground is often far more nuanced, almost paradoxical, really. Many family businesses, maybe the ones not grabbing the headlines, haven't just survived, they've thrived, sometimes for centuries. Think about, say, the Italian winemaker Marchesi and Tenori. Established way back in 1385, still family-owned after more than 600 years. Or Gekkeiken in Japan, they've been brewing sake since 1637. Barry Bros and Rudd in the UK, the wine merchant, since 1698. And Jose Cuervo in Mexico, making tequila since 1795. These aren't just, outliers or anomalies. They represent this incredible, often quiet resilience, a profound ability to adapt across generations.
So that leaves us with this really interesting question. Is it fragility or is it resilience that truly defines these businesses? Our sources today, especially drawing from How to Build a Family Business in HBR, they tell us it's unequivocally both. And for you, maybe digging into this for your master's thesis on family enterprises, understanding this inherent duality, this sort of tension between potential implosion and incredible longevity, that's absolutely key. These aren't niche players we're talking about. Family businesses make up an estimated 85% of the world's companies. Just in the United States alone, that's about 5.5 million businesses. And they employ a staggering 62% of the workforce. This isn't some quaint corner of the economy. It's massive, really impactful.
Yeah, and the crucial differentiator, the thing that's often glossed over in, say, standard business courses or even those media stories, is the profound impact of ownership. See, unlike publicly traded companies where owners are mostly investors, maybe voting on board members, their influence is kind of indirect. But in a family business, a small group of related people wield immense decision-making power, almost absolute, really. Their ability to fundamentally shape the company, deciding to fire a CEO, changing the whole strategy, even defining its very purpose, it's huge. And critically, this potent power is itself shaped by their relationships with one another, their personal ties. That unique, often intense mix creates those extraordinary highs and, yes, those dramatic lows we hear about, because family relationships, they're inherently complex, deeply emotional.
So, the engine driving everything we're discussing today is really this unique family ownership dynamic, grasping its intricacies, its levers, its pitfalls. That's going to be invaluable as you delve into your own research. Our deep dive today will explore 5 core rights that fundamentally come with family ownership. We'll use them as a framework, a way to understand not just what family businesses do, but how they structure themselves to survive, to thrive. Understanding these rights and, crucially, the common difficulties that pop up when they're misunderstood or misapplied that can be the difference. The difference between a multi-generational legacy and, well, an unfortunate implosion. They're fundamental to how these businesses operate, innovate, and sometimes, unfortunately, fail. Okay, so our mission in this deep dive is to unpack these 5 rights. The right to design your ownership, the right to decide how you govern, the right to value what truly matters to you, the right to inform your stakeholders, and finally, the right to transfer the business to the next generation. We'll illustrate the main difficulties families often face in each area, using specific examples from our sources. And then we'll offer some battle-tested approaches to navigate them. Think of this as maybe your shortcut to understanding the foundational challenges, a robust framework for your analysis. All right, let's kick off with the first right, the right to design. This boils down to asking, what type of ownership do you actually want for your business? It might sound straightforward, maybe just a legal formality, but our sources reveal there are 4 fundamentally different types. And this choice, it isn't just about paperwork. It profoundly defines who gets involved, who can participate, and it can become this unrecognized source of deep, festering conflict within the family. Getting this initial design right, or knowing when to adapt it, is just absolutely critical for long-term harmony and success.
Yeah, this is way more than just picking a legal structure. It's a strategic choice, one with potentially generational implications. It really raises an important question for any family starting out or even midstream. Are you truly clear on which type best suits your family's unique dynamics and the business's strategic needs? It's surprising how many families don't consciously choose. They often just inherit a structure or sort of fall into one, and then they find themselves grappling with difficulties down the road they never anticipated. The statistics kind of underscore this diversity. Among family businesses, roughly 13% are sole owners, about 24% partnerships, 36% have distributed ownership, and 27% use concentrated ownership. That spread alone tells you there's no single best way. It really demands careful, proactive thought.
Okay, let's delve into these 4 types then. Look at their strengths and the difficulties they tend to present. First up is sole owner. So in this model, one family member basically owns the company outright, makes all the ultimate decisions. The strengths seem pretty clear, especially when decisive leadership is really crucial. And maybe if the business generates enough cash to support family members who aren't owners, or if there are other non-business assets that can do that. A classic example is the French cognac maker, House of Camus. They've had a sole owner since 1863. The current owner, Cyril Camus, he actually strategically bought out his siblings' shares. That move consolidated control, yeah, but it also minimized potential family arguments around the business, gave it a clear, singular vision.
But here's where it gets really interesting for your analysis. Sole ownership, despite that clear chain of command, faces some significant hurdles. Hurdles that can undermine its long-term viability and even the family's unity. The most prominent difficulty, succession. It becomes the central and really contentious issue. How do you decide who takes over? Is it based purely on merit, judged by the current owner? Or does it follow a more traditional rule, maybe primogeniture, which might not be meritocratic at all? And then how do you fairly figure out benefits or involvement for other family members, the ones not directly in the business, but who might still feel a strong connection or even entitlement to the family wealth? This model is inherently risky because a significant chunk of the family's financial capital and its human talent can walk out the door each generation. As others get bought out or just disengaged, that continuous outflow of resources, well, it can potentially weaken the whole family enterprise over time, make it more vulnerable.
Okay, so if sole ownership centralizes control, what happens when active family members decide they want to share that load? That brings us to the partnership model. Here, ownership is specifically restricted. Only family members who are actively working in the business can be owners. This approach allows for multiple perspectives, right? It fosters a more collaborative environment, and it keeps those family owners highly engaged. That seems like a real strength. Cultivates a shared sense of responsibility, a shared direction. The German-Dutch Brenningmeier family, 6th-generation owners of the C&A clothing chain. They're a perfect example. They only admit children to the partnership after this really competitive, rigorous evaluation. Often involves an apprenticeship first. It ensures that the owners aren't just committed, but they're genuinely qualified, really invested in the day-to-day.
Exactly. And while it's certainly more resilient than sole ownership, you're not relying on just one leader's vision. Partnerships are still vulnerable. You can still lose capital and talent if active members decide to leave. The major challenge for this structure really lies in defining clear, objective, and transparent rules. Rules for who can join and who can leave the ownership group. Inevitably, conflicts can bubble up, especially over who gets admitted, particularly when the process is competitive like at C&A. Think about it. Those not selected, despite their family connection, might feel disappointed, resentful even. And even if the business decisions are sound, that can still impact the broader family unity, those relationships outside the business.
Right, okay. Moving on, we encountered distributed ownership. In this model, basically any family member can be an owner, regardless of whether they work in the business or not, and they can participate in decision-making. Shares often get passed down pretty evenly to all descendants in each generation. This approach seems to work well when most of the family wealth is intrinsically tied up in the company, or sometimes when culture or law dictates that kind of widespread ownership. Brazil's Votorantim conglomerate is a big example of a thriving distributed ownership model. A key strength here is its ability to keep family capital within the business. You avoid that potentially huge recurring cost of having to buy out non-owner family members, which can be a real burden for other structures.
This model, however, brings in a whole complex set of people problems, and these are absolutely critical for your research into family business dynamics. With potentially a large number of owners, their engagement levels, their understanding of the business, it can vary wildly. That makes it extremely challenging to align all their diverse interests. To define clear norms for how decisions get made, a significant and really common difficulty is the potential for resentment about free riders. You know, those who are only investors may be getting dividends, while other family members are grinding it out, operating the business day to day, taking on the operational risks and stress. Plus, major problems can blow up if some members decide they want to cash out their shares. That could force a sale the rest of the family doesn't want, or create serious internal financial strain trying to buy them out. This really highlights the critical need for a clearly defined, fair, and accessible way for people to exit. An exit ramp for shares to prevent forced sales or damaging internal conflict.
Okay, and that leads us finally to concentrated ownership. Here, any family member might technically be an owner, but a specific, usually smaller subset of the family holds the reins. They control the majority of decision-making power. This structure tries to mitigate some of those challenges we just talked about with distributed ownership. It works particularly well when you need decisive action frequently, even with lots of owners on paper. Vitamix, the blender company 100 years old, they operate effectively this way. Shares get passed down, but in each generation, the CEO has to own or control a majority of the voting shares. They get the final call, even if they usually aim for consensus with other owners. So it's a balance, right? Harnessing broad family ownership, but keeping that centralized, decisive control.
Right. But the central difficulty with concentrated ownership, and it gets trickier with every new generation, is that perennial question: who will lead? As the family tree branches out, the pool of potential leaders, and maybe those vying for control, often grows significantly. This structure can lead to intense conflict. Arguments over who holds that ultimate control, maybe between different family branches or individuals. Another big risk. Those family members who aren't in the controlling subset, well, they might gradually lose interest, feel disconnected. Then they might decide to sell their shares. That could fragment ownership further, maybe bring in outside shareholders you don't want, or force costly buyouts that drain the company's capital. Keeping those non-controlling owners engaged, feeling loyal, feeling like they belong, even if they don't hold the reins, that's a constant, demanding challenge for this model.
What's truly fascinating here, and something that should really inform your academic work, is that this choice, the ownership type, it isn't static. It's not a one-and-done decision. Our sources really emphasize this need to constantly be on the lookout for necessary changes. Maybe when a new generation is getting ready to join, or when the business itself changes significantly in size or complexity, or the market shifts. The Antinori winemaking family, we mentioned them earlier, they're a brilliant example of this adaptability. They had a sole owner for 25 generations. Control traditionally passed to a male heir to keep the business and land together. But when Piero Antinori took over in 1966, he had 3 daughters, no sons. Instead of forcing an outdated model onto his family, he strategically chose a 3-way partnership with his daughters. He adapted, ensured continuity by changing the ownership structure to fit his family's reality.
And that highlights such a critical insight. Flexibility and foresight in ownership design are just as important, maybe even more important, than the initial choice you make. Families have to proactively look at their current structure. Understand its strengths, yes, but also its vulnerabilities, and be willing to evolve it. The real takeaway here is that the optimal ownership design isn't something you find at the start. It's something you continually forge, responding to demographic shifts, new aspirations. Rigidity, not necessarily a poor initial choice, is often the family business's silent killer. It lets those difficulties we've discussed just compound over generations, potentially jeopardizing everything.
Okay, so once you've wrestled with that fundamental question of who owns what and the best design for your family, the next logical step is thinking about how those owners actually steer the ship. And that brings us right to the second crucial right, the right to decide. Our sources say family business owners wield profound decision-making power, often down to, every single dollar spent. We've heard stories, even in quite large companies, where not a single major expense gets made without the owner signing off. Now, when that power is channeled effectively, it's a huge competitive advantage. It allows for incredible nimbleness, real speed. Alexandre Leviant, president of ICD, that chemical conglomerate his father founded, he specifically mentioned their ability to push large projects through quickly. Why? Because decisions don't get bogged down in layers of corporate bureaucracy.
Exactly. However, that concentrated power, it's definitely a double-edged sword. And wielding it ineffectively is a major difficulty, one that can directly lead to stagnation or even failure. Too much control, often showing up as micromanagement, can really stifle innovation. Management gets hesitant, right? Afraid to act without constant owner input. It also makes it incredibly difficult to attract and keep great entrepreneurial talent. People who don't want every decision second-guessed or scrutinized. But the flip side is also dangerous. Owners who step back too much, who completely abdicate responsibility, they create this dangerous vacuum. And as our sources warn, that vacuum can get filled by self-interested, non-family executives, maybe looking to run the company down so they can buy it cheap in a fire sale. Classic agency problem, really. This is a crucial area for your research into business failure modes. It shows the delicate, critical balance needed in governance.
That push and pull, micromanaging versus abdicating. It sounds like a constant tightrope walk. Is there a common pitfall here? Are most family businesses usually too hands-on or too hands-off, especially as they grow? This balancing act must get exponentially harder with more family members involved, more complex operations. How do you maintain control over the big strategic stuff while truly empowering your teams, your professional managers, to make effective day-to-day calls? It's a question so many must wrestle with.
It truly varies, but often the real underlying issue isn't whether they're too hands-on or hands-off. It's the lack of clarity on where that line should be drawn. That ambiguity, that's the real killer. To tackle this, our sources propose a really powerful framework. It helps guide decision-making and minimize that conflict. It's called the four-room model. Imagine your business like a house. It has distinct, clearly defined rooms for the owners, the board, management, and the larger family. Each room has explicit rules, who belongs in there, what decisions get made there, and how those decisions are carried out. This model brings much-needed clarity to governance, and it implicitly addresses a lot of those agency issues we see in complex organizations, but with that added layer of family relationships.
Okay, so let's elaborate on those rooms. The owner's room, that's where the family, as shareholders, sets the high-level goals, right? Defines the overall direction, elects the board. Then the boardroom oversees the business, provides strategic direction, ensures good governance, and critically hires and fires the CEO. The management room is where the executive team, led by the CEO, recommends specific strategies and handles the day-to-day operations. And the family room. Crucially, it sits alongside the others. It's not for business decisions itself, but it's about emphasizing emotional connection, fostering unity, a neutral ground for family members to connect, regardless of their business role. That clear separation seems vital, helping prevent family issues from spilling inappropriately into business decisions.
Precisely. The genius of this model is its absolute clarity, delineating roles and responsibilities. People's authority, their involvement, it varies significantly from room to room. For example, a non-family CEO might run the management room, making operational calls, but they shouldn't have a say in how the family owners decide to use their dividends. That's an owner's room decision. Similarly, non-owner family members, just because they're family, can't just walk into the boardroom or management room and start making business decisions. It establishes clear hierarchy, clear boundaries. It prevents that chaos, those blurred lines of authority and responsibility you see in so many family firms. It's about ensuring the right people with the right expertise are making the right decisions in the right place. Separating the family's emotional system from the business's operational one. Think about Steve, the head of that regional retail chain mentioned in the source. His self-described cowboy instincts, his habit of making big decisions alone sparked deep resentment. His sister and cousin were equal owners. He was essentially trying to operate in the management room, the boardroom, and the owner's room all by himself. His impulsive decisions didn't just create conflict and distrust among the co-owners, they actually threatened the business's strategy. By adopting the four-room model, they explicitly created an owner's council that's the owner's room. Steve had to consult them for major strategic decisions. This didn't just calm his co-owner's fears, it forced Steve to plan more carefully. To articulate his reasoning, consider other views. This structured approach got both the business and the family relationships back on track. It really shows how a lack of process can destroy collaboration and how structure can systematically restore it.
So this model, then, it isn't just about putting up fences. It actually allows owners to delegate with more confidence while still keeping control over the most important strategic questions. It gives you a clear, established process for revisiting decisions when goals change for the family or the business or both. Definitely a powerful tool for your thesis, thinking about organizational structure and how good governance can effectively mitigate these classic family business challenges, turning potential conflict into productive collaboration. Okay, now let's move to the third right, the right to value. This is about asking a fundamental question. How will you define success for your family business? For publicly held companies, the answer seems simple, right? Narrowly focused. Maximize shareholder returns. That's the main directive. Nearly every decision gets filtered through that lens. But our sources make it really clear. Very few family businesses define their primary objective that way. And that, in many ways, is one of their greatest strengths. It allows for a much broader, more human definition of success, one that goes way beyond just quarterly financial numbers.
This is a truly critical distinction, and one that should really underpin a lot of your academic exploration. Family ownership gives you this unique freedom, the freedom to determine what truly matters most to you, the owners. You're not constantly beholden to the short-term pressures of the public market. You're not forced to prioritize immediate earnings growth over, say, providing meaningful jobs for family members, or maybe pursuing opportunities that deeply align with your core values, your beliefs, even if they aren't the absolute most profitable in the short run. This enables a powerful, genuinely long-term generational approach. You can invest in things that might pay off in decades, not just the next quarter, fostering a kind of patient capital that public companies rarely have.
Right. But the significant difficulty arises precisely when families aren't clear, when they're not explicit and aligned about what they value most. This ambiguity, this lack of clarity, it can trigger intense internal battles over priorities, lead to strategic paralysis because the family just can't agree on a direction. It can also make it hard to attract and keep talented employees, family or non-family, who get frustrated by fuzzy objectives and shifting goalposts. And more fundamentally, if your collective objectives are hazy, you risk losing your raison d'etre, your deep shared reason for being in business together, especially as the company grows, transitions to new generations. Without that shared purpose, that emotional glue, the very foundation holding the family and business together can just slowly dissolve. It makes owners far more tempted to just cash out.
To avoid that fate, you absolutely need a clear owner strategy, one that identifies concrete goals and sets up what our sources call guardrails. The source identifies three main, often competing, goals for family businesses, and they frequently lead to a strategic pick-two situation. This creates what they call the owner strategy triangle. It's a framework to help families deliberately choose what to prioritize, acknowledging upfront you can't always maximize everything at once, making those choices explicit. That's a profound act of strategic clarity.
Okay, let's break down those three goals in the owner strategy triangle. First, we have growth. That means maximizing financial value, trying to make the business bigger, more profitable, expand its market share. Then there's liquidity. This prioritizes healthy, consistent cash flow for the owners to use outside the business, maybe for personal investments, philanthropy, supporting a certain lifestyle. And finally, control. This means adamantly keeping decision-making authority firmly within the ownership group, avoiding outside equity or debt that would dilute their power or bring in external influence. Our sources found most successful family businesses consciously prioritize these three. That forms three basic, distinct strategies.
Understanding these combinations is really vital for your thesis. Each one implies a very different set of priorities, trade-offs, and an underlying philosophy about wealth, business, and stewardship. The three main strategies are, first, growth control companies. This is the most common type the sources identified. These businesses are driven to get bigger, maximize financial value, scale up, but they do it while adamantly keeping decisions firmly within the owner's hands. No outside influence, no dilution of power, expansion, but only on their terms. Second, growth liquidity companies. These also want aggressive growth, aiming to get bigger and more valuable, but they also prioritize paying out significant money to owners for use outside the business. Now, to fuel that growth while providing owner liquidity, they often use outside equity or debt. That means consciously relinquishing some degree of control. There's a definite trade-off there. And third, liquidity control companies. These aren't primarily focused on rapid growth. Instead, their main goal is to produce significant, consistent cash flow for the owners while retaining full decision-making authority. They might be perfectly happy with a stable, highly profitable business that reliably serves the family's financial needs without needing aggressive expansion or external capital. What's really crucial here, though, these aren't static choices. These strategies should flow directly from your fundamental family values, and they must be revisited, potentially adapted, as things change, economic shifts, industry changes, new regulations, generational transitions, even internal family conflicts. The real power of the owner strategy triangle isn't just picking two goals. It's deliberately not choosing the third. That explicit sacrifice, that's where true strategic clarity comes from. It aligns expectations and prevents future fights over misaligned dreams.
But just aligning on priorities isn't quite enough, is it? You need concrete ways to measure performance, make sure those priorities are actually being acted on by the management team. That's precisely where guardrails come in. These are explicit boundaries or rules that ensure the people running the business day to day are directing energy and resources towards what you, the owners, care about most. They let you delegate with confidence because you know the strategic boundaries. The expectations are clear and being monitored.
Exactly. Guardrails can be distinctly financial. Things like setting a minimum return on invested capital, defining maximum debt levels, establishing clear profit margin targets. These ensure the company stays within defined financial limits, doesn't take on too much risk, protects the family's assets. But even more interesting, and often really revealing for your thesis, are non-financial guardrails. These define outcomes for which owners are explicitly willing to sacrifice some financial performance. And they're often deeply rooted in the family's values, their unique glue. Our sources cite this compelling example. A U.S.-based family business lost relatives in the Holocaust. It now operates with a non-financial guardrail that prohibits investment in countries with low scores in Freedom House's annual ratings, even if there are financially more lucrative opportunities elsewhere. That vividly illustrates how deeply held values can, and often do, supersede pure profit motives, and how those values can become embedded right into the company's long-term strategy and identity.
Having this clear owner strategy, complete with defined goals and these robust guardrails, financial and non-financial, that's truly what fosters longevity. It ensures both the financial and the non-financial goals are consistently met. But beyond the measurable stuff, it builds that essential emotional connection, that profound ability to say, we own this to make a difference, or this business represents our grandfather's sacrifice. Without that deep shared emotional connection, that compelling story of purpose, owners are far more tempted to just see the business as another asset on a spreadsheet, and eventually maybe just cash out. Okay, moving on to our fourth right, the right to inform. This is about consciously deciding what information will you share, and maybe more critically, what won't you communicate about your business. Owners inherently have a legal right to know a great deal. Financials, organizational records, ownership documents, and crucially, unless they bring in outside investors or lenders or independent board members, they generally aren't legally obligated to share that info with anyone else. This control over communication is immense. It makes it an incredibly powerful lever for family business owners, shaping perceptions both inside and outside the family.
Right. And this right, if you exercise it effectively, strategically, it's absolutely critical to building one of a family business's most valuable, yet often underappreciated, assets. Trusted relationships. These relationships, for your academic investigation, they are the bedrock for three vital forms of capital, all essential for long-term success, for resilience across generations. First, financial capital. This isn't just the money itself. It's about having committed owners who have a deep emotional connection to the business. That commitment means they value long-term performance, they're willing to reinvest profits, and crucially, they're ready to support it through tough times, maybe by foregoing dividends. Second, human capital. This includes highly engaged employees and family members, including spouses, who often contribute huge amounts of emotional labor, who bring their full talents, dedication, and the extra discretionary effort to their work and the broader family enterprise. Feeling informed really fosters this engagement. And third, social capital. This is about building a positive reputation, not just within the family, but with customers, suppliers, the wider public, other key stakeholders. That positive standing can help differentiate you in a crowded market and build invaluable partnerships that can last for generations.
Yeah, it's completely understandable why owners might feel an impulse to keep things private. It can protect the business from competitors, shield the family from gossip or unwanted attention, maintain a sense of internal control. But here's the inherent difficulty. If owners consistently hold their cards too close to the vest, if they operate with excessive privacy, they risk starving the business, starving it of its ability to cultivate those invaluable trusted relationships. Secrecy, instead of protecting, can actually breed distrust, disengagement, even paranoia sometimes, both internally among family members and externally with vital partners.
The source gives a really compelling and cautionary example. Sophie. She's a business school professor who married into a fourth-generation Asian media business. She started noticing this casual, almost complacent attitude towards innovation in the company. When she, with her academic background, started asking pointed questions about long-term strategy, market adaptation, the executive team felt threatened, maybe just weren't used to it. They started withholding more and more information from her. Eventually, they even asked her husband, who was an active owner, to stop sharing financial reports with her. They were afraid she'd rock the boat or expose weaknesses. So Sophie, feeling stonewalled, disrespected, and increasingly anxious about her kids' future inheritance, she gradually withdrew. She even started scheduling vacations elsewhere during the family's annual reunions, basically opting out of family life centered around the business. Now, this didn't just deprive her children of building essential relationships with their cousins, their future co-owners. It starkly showed how a failure to communicate can have devastating long-term impacts on family unity, trust, and ultimately business continuity. It created this deep rift that could take generations to heal, all stemming from an information lockdown.
So what does this all mean as you consider communication strategies for your research? Early on, sure, communication might be informal, happens organically over family meals, casual chats, but as things grow, family expands, business gets more complex. You need to consciously think about more structured approaches, regular family meetings, maybe clear communication policies, setting up a dedicated family office, even using tech platforms to keep dialogue consistent. The key is to consciously align on what you will and won't disclose, and to which specific audience family members not in the business, active employees, independent directors, external stakeholders. It's not about revealing absolutely everything. It's about being strategic and transparent in the choices you make.
Exactly. Owners often worry excessively about protecting the nitty-gritty details of their wealth, and in doing so, they inadvertently miss these profound opportunities to connect stakeholders inside and outside the family to the business's long-term success, its compelling vision. While sure, some specific financial details might genuinely need to stay private for competitive reasons, there's a wealth of information that can, and frankly should, be shared. Share your owner values, share your strategy, share your passion for the business, how key decisions get made, your thoughts on succession. And if you do decide to keep something private, explain why. Transparency isn't just about sharing data, it's about explaining the reasoning behind your choices. The sources highlight numerous cases where communication failure was the single biggest reason a family business died. And conversely, where skillful, empathetic communication pulled a company through incredibly tough times, you really need to wield this right wisely. It's arguably the most powerful tool for building that enduring engagement and trust across all dimensions of the family enterprise.
Okay, finally, we come to the fifth right, the right to transfer. This is all about deciding how to exit. Who will own the business next? What form will that ownership take? And precisely when will this transition happen? These are profoundly complex decisions, often incredibly emotionally charged, because they touch on such deeply personal issues. How do you genuinely let go, especially something you've often built with your own hands, your own heart? What roles should the next generation play, and how do you adequately prepare them, emotionally and professionally? Are their relationships strong enough? Is their trust deep enough to work through tough decisions, to collaborate effectively? These questions touch on mortality, personal identity, legacy, makes them incredibly difficult to confront, often leads to just putting it off.
And that procrastination, or just poorly planning this transition, is arguably the biggest difficulty here, one that can wreak absolute havoc on both the business and the family. It raises an important question: what's the tangible cost of delay? Well, a Boston consulting group study looked at over 200 Indian family businesses. They found a staggering 28 percentage point difference in market cap growth between companies that had proactively planned their transitions and those that hadn't. 28%. That's a massive financial impact, directly linked to planning. Entire family empires can be consolidated, strengthened, or tragically squandered, and this crucial transfer of power across generations. The stakes for both family wealth and family legacy truly couldn't be higher.
So to navigate this incredibly complex landscape, to execute a truly successful transition, our sources insist you need a robust continuity plan. This isn't just about getting lawyers to draft documents or simply handing over the keys on a specific date. It's a comprehensive, living map, a map from the current generation to the next, and it needs to address three main interconnected challenges. It demands forethought, empathy, and a really systematic approach, not just a reactive last-minute scramble.
These three pillars are absolutely crucial for your thesis on intergenerational business sustainability. First, passing down assets. This involves critical decisions about the ownership structure itself. Will you keep the current type or strategically change it? Maybe to better suit the next generation's needs or the changing business landscape. Will you transfer ownership all at once or do it gradually? For example, maybe give economic interests the right to dividends while the current generation keeps voting control for a while. And crucially, what tax minimizing tools will you use? Various trusts, dynasty trusts, GRATs, gifting strategies. How will you strategically employ these to preserve wealth for the family and the business? Ensure its long-term viability. This is strategic financial planning, not just legal paperwork. Second, handing off roles. This means creating a carefully managed glide path, helping current leaders gradually let go, avoiding an abrupt or traumatic handover. How will successors be chosen? For roles across all four rooms: owners, board, management, family. The process needs to be seen as fair and, most importantly, designed to find the most talented, capable people, whether they're family or not. This might involve mentoring, temporary joint leadership roles, maybe a period of shadowing. The goal is a truly smooth passing of the baton. Minimize disruption, maintain effectiveness, but also preserve the dignity of the outgoing generation. And third, developing next-generation capabilities. What specific skills, what competencies will the new owners need, whether they work in the business day-to-day or not? This goes way beyond just technical or operational skills. It includes leadership, understanding governance, financial literacy, and those crucial communication skills needed to navigate complex family dynamics. How do you help them identify their best-suited roles within the whole family enterprise? Active manager, engaged board member, informed, responsible owner. And maybe most importantly, how do you create structured opportunities for them to learn how to collaborate effectively with each other? Building those crucial relationships, that shared trust, that fundamentally underpins all family business success.
And crucially, the source really emphasizes that transition is fundamentally a process, not an event. It's not a single moment of signing papers. It's an ongoing journey. Continuous preparation, open communication, deliberate alignment. And the continuity plan itself, it has to resemble a discussion. A collaborative, iterative effort involving multiple generations, not an ultimatum dictated by one generation to the next. Incoming leaders need to be thoroughly prepared. They need to understand the why behind the plan and be genuinely aligned with its vision for it to actually succeed and endure.
A powerful and often cited cautionary tale for your research is the Pritzker family, the ones who built the Hyatt Hotels empire. Jay Pritzker, the very influential third-generation leader, and his brother Robert. They simply gathered the family in 1995. Handed out a 2-page document outlining their elaborate succession plans. It detailed this complex web of trusts, distributions, assigned leadership to a triumvirate. Now, it was undoubtedly well-intentioned, meticulously crafted, legally, but it failed spectacularly. Why? Because it was dictated, not discussed. There was no real preparation, no alignment beforehand. Just months after Jay died in 1999, lawsuits started erupting among family members. Fueled by lack of understanding, perceived unfairness, unaddressed anxieties, the family eventually had to completely divide its vast holdings, dissolving much of that integrated empire. It just demonstrates the profound consequences of a plan dictated without adequate preparation, without buy-in, without genuine alignment. Shows how even immense wealth and brilliant legal structures can't overcome a fundamental lack of collaborative succession planning.
Wow. So after hearing that, what do you think is the single biggest hurdle to continuity planning? It's simply getting started, isn't it? It's incredibly tempting to put off those cross-generational conversations because they can be fraught with difficult issues: mortality, identity, fear of conflict, the sheer discomfort of discussing tough topics. When pressing present concerns loom large, the future often gets pushed aside. But the message from our sources is crystal clear. Put those conversations on your agenda. Make them explicit, whether it's in your owner's room with a dedicated task force, through your board, and set deadlines. Procrastination here isn't just a delay, it's really a recipe for potential disaster down the line. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what have we learned about the main difficulties faced by family businesses? From consciously choosing the right ownership structure to defining what success truly means beyond just profit, communicating effectively, transparently with everyone involved, and meticulously planning for the next generation. Each of these 5 rights presents unique and profoundly complex challenges. They require constant attention, introspection, and a really proactive approach, not just waiting until problems flare up.
Indeed. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the source makes it unequivocally clear. Without hard and smart work, this continuous, intentional effort from the owners, from other family members, from the employees, family businesses often implode. There are just so many competing interests: financial, emotional, personal, professional. And if they're not managed through clear structures, open communication, intentional effort, they can quickly turn destructive. That natural inclination for family dynamics to complicate business decisions, it's a powerful force. It has to be constantly navigated with wisdom, with foresight.
You're right. There's no single magic bullet here. No universal best practice that fits every single family business. Each family, each business is unique. But by diligently applying this 5 rights framework, design, decide, value, inform, and transfer families can systematically organize themselves. Prepare for the intensive ongoing work that family ownership really demands. It provides this robust analytical lens, a way to examine, understand, and address these inherent complexities.
And this framework also raises an important question for you, the learner. Our sources strongly suggest that periodically assessing your family business's performance against each of these 5 rights, sharing those results transparently, and then developing a collaborative plan to build on the strengths and shore up the vulnerabilities. That's crucial. It's this continuous collaboration, this willingness to engage in the difficult conversations, to adapt, to evolve, that truly enables you to harness the profound power of family ownership, to sustain your business for generations to come.
So, for your academic work, and maybe just thinking beyond that, consider this. If the relationships between family members are truly the fundamental force shaping a family business's ability to wield its ownership power effectively, then how might proactively investing in strengthening those relationships, independent of any immediate business agenda, just focusing on the family connection itself, how might that be the single most potent sixth right for ultimate longevity? Definitely something to mull over as you dive deeper into your research and perhaps even observe in the world around you.